What is happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. I'm Bob Wankel. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. We have finally made it. We are in the same week that the 2024 regular season is going to start. Spring training finally coming to a close. We've got some answers about what the Phillies are going to do as they arrive at Citizens Bank Park this week. We also have a couple questions, though, that have emerged. Something that was already a question in Taijuan Walker has now turned into an even bigger one. So we are going to get into those final roster decisions. Talked a little bit about that late last week, but we do have some new developments there. So we're going to hit on those, and then we're going to turn the page and look ahead at what comes next and what is actually going to happen with this team this season. So we'll make some predictions, things that we think are going to, be surprises, things that might kind of catch us by surprise that are maybe not so positive, and then try to figure out who's going to win this thing, who's going to win the NL East, how far will the Phillies go, what will their final record be, and all of that good stuff. So that's how we're going to tackle today's show. Anthony, I'll bring you in right now. And I guess, man, let's get right to it. Johan Rojas is going to be in center field. Taijuan Walker's not going to be in the starting rotation to start the season. What are your impressions here?
I'm not surprised about either. As it turns out, I think that the Rojas decision is one that they're going to end up questioning themselves. And I think that it was one that they really thought long and hard about. And the fact that they decided to go with Pache as the last bench option and not a Jake Cave, who they traded to Colorado, or any of the other guys that are in the minors, like a David Dahl or like a Jordan Luplow, tells me that they aren't even confident enough in their own decision to go with this. Like, they are literally going to eschew having a left-handed bat on the bench specifically to carry another version of Johan Rojas.
Well, are you okay with the fact that they're not going to carry a left-handed bat? Or can you kind of wrap your mind around, like, hey, Whit Merrifield off the bench is fine, even if it's righty-righty. You might not have Brandon Marsh in the game to start anyway in certain situations. He becomes a bench option. Like, do you kind of roll with that, or is that a big mistake here? So
here's the thing. I'm totally fine with it as far as assuming everybody's healthy, right? I mean, if you assume with the lineup being completely healthy, Whit Merrifield, the only guy you're going to bat for in the lineup at any point, your only guy you're going to pinch hit for against it is Rojas, really. The only other one maybe you bat for Brandon Marsh against a lefty, like tough lefty, maybe you pinch hit for him. But otherwise, you're not pinch hitting for anybody in that lineup other than Rojas. And Merrifield is perfectly fine as a pinch hitter. His career, he's got pretty even splits against righties and lefties. So even if they bring in a right-hander out of the bullpen, I'm cool with Whit Merrifield being a pinch hitter in that spot. Totally fine. And then, of course, if Merrifield's in the lineup, then it might be Brandon Marsh, it might be Alec Boehm who's getting a day off, might be Bryson Stott who's getting a day off, whatever. You have one of the regulars who can pinch hit and if need be. So I think you're okay in that regard. The concern that I have is if somebody gets hurt, then what do you do? Because then Merrifield probably has to become a regular, and then you don't have that pinch hitting option. And I guess at that point, if you call somebody up from the minor leagues, right? But then you're talking about adding somebody to the 40-man, unless it's Cody Clemens, who's on the 40. He's the only one who is really that is a left-handed option. Derek Hall, if you really want to go that route again, right? I mean, but those are the guys. And so, okay, fine. So I guess I kind of get through it. My bigger concern with this decision is not about the bat off the bench. It's what the position you're putting Johan Rojas in. Spring training, you say, it doesn't matter if you don't hit. Don't worry about if you don't hit. Just work on what we're telling you to work on. It's going to be okay. And they were true to their word with him, and they're bringing him up to the big club, and that's great. But now you put him in a spot where if he basically craters and hits 150, playing pretty much every day in the majors, like, what do you do then? And then you send him down, and then have you destroyed his confidence at that point? Whereas if you start him down, let him get hot, let him get that confidence, and then bring him up in a month, then I think you're in better shape.
Well, I think
with
that
him
the
as a
question
player.
kind of becomes, and it's a valid point. I think the question becomes, is he really going to get the work that he needs if he starts the season down? Like, is he going to see that caliber of pitching in AAA? And how much of this is really about confidence? Because you could kind of turn that around and say, well, if you don't bring him north after you basically said, don't worry about results, just do what we're asking you to do, your defense is going to be enough. And then you send him down. Does that crush him? Does he start the season down there and just kind of never rebound? Like, you don't know how a certain player is going to react in a certain situation. So, like, what is best for him? Is it giving him a shot, or is it turning around and saying, you know what, you need more time, you're just not there yet? And like, can he roll with that? And I think that you probably have to assess each player on an individual basis and sort of know what their psyche is and how they're going to be able to roll with certain decisions. We talked about it last week. Like, if he only hits 180 and he has a 210 on base percentage for the first 30 days of the season, is it really going to matter in terms of wins or losses? Like, maybe he loses you a game at some point. Maybe his lack of offensive production outweighs his defensive production. Maybe that happens, but like, is there really a lot of risk in letting this guy play the first 25, 30 games of the season just to see if he can give them exactly what they're looking for?
No, I think his defense is good enough that he's not going to be a minus WAR player, right? Overall, he might be a minus offensive WAR player, but he's not going to be a minus WAR player overall, right? In that regard, you're right, absolutely. But then I think that it fundamentally affects the lineup in the sense that the whole argument that I've been making for the last year as to why I support their decision to go with Kyle Schwarber as your leadoff hitter is because the guys at the bottom of the lineup are getting on base. Right. They get on base, and so that it gives him opportunities to drive in runs. And so if Rojas, now last year, remember when he came up, he hit 302, right? So, I mean, yeah, it was a kind of a phony 302, but he hit 302 nevertheless. He's not going to do that now. And so you basically need him to say, look, if you can hit 225, you're fine. This all works out. But if you're hitting 160 out of the 9-hole,
160
and you don't walk, then what good is having Kyle Schwarber come up with nobody on base every time?
And I've heard the argument be made that you're actually really putting in Johan Rojas in a great position. Like, wow, you're going to be protecting him with Kyle Schwarber, so they're going to attack him. He's going to get pitches to hit. And I'm like, okay, like that is fundamentally true. At the same time, am I worried about maximizing the upside of Johan Rojas, or am I worried about maximizing the upside in production of Kyle Schwarber? And I'm more worried about Kyle Schwarber than I am Johan Rojas getting pitches to hit,
Correct.
That is the flaw, I think, in that line of thinking. So it's going to be interesting. And I do think that the Phillies, what they ultimately decided to do here is essentially give themselves a little bit of a safety net. Like, if this does not work out with Johan Rojas over the first month or two of the season, then they can, as I've said, by keeping Christian Pache, they give themselves a little bit of a safety net. Maybe a player with a little bit of a lower floor, or a higher floor, I should say.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like an insurance policy. Like, if we have to send him down, if this doesn't work out, then we still have a guy who maybe doesn't have the same elite defensive skills, but is still pretty damn good out there, pretty sure-handed. And it's a nice little like backup plan, and somebody that can be a late inning defensive replacement and still maybe help contribute in the short term before that disaster scenario sort of comes to be.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised early in the season anyway, if they really try and protect Rojas a little bit with this.
Yeah. Like, does he need to play 6 times a week?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think you'll see Pache play center field against lefties. I think the outfield against lefties is going to be Merrifield in left and Pache in center, and Rojas and Marsh on the bench. I mean, I think so. So I think it's not that it's a maybe not a full on platoon, but I think at least for the start of the season it might be, just to kind of protect Rojas a little bit more. Okay. Because you don't, like you said, you don't lose a lot by putting Pache in center field. So I think that's a possibility. They talked again about how much they like him about hitting lefties, and he had a nice game again, spring training. But the day of, was it the game against the Yankees? He had a 3-hit game, right? Another 3-hit game, hit 286 in spring training. Like, he's done a nice job. So I mean, he's earned it. He's earned a spot on the team. Not to say that that he didn't. Pache hasn't earned it, but
are you okay with him over Cave? Like any reservations about that?
No, I'm fine with it. I maybe wouldn't have been had they not brought in Dahl, who they can put in the minors, right? Because he has a minor league contract right now. So I think that I'm good with it that way, because if you need that left-handed outfield bat, right, just add David Dahl to your 40-man, and David Dahl to me is a better hitter than Jake Cave. Yeah. So I think that I'm fine with it in that regard. Yes.
All right. Well, last week we talked about Taijuan Walker, and we had some concerns about him and the back end of this Phillies rotation before we learned that he's going to miss the start of the season, before we learned of this latest injury setback. And I really don't want to dedicate too much more time on this show to discussing Taijuan Walker, because we did that at length last week. So I don't want to relitigate all of the potential issues here, but I guess the way I would like to frame this conversation as we enter it is, in light of this most recent information, does it change your opinion about what the Phillies should do in the short term while he's out, or I guess, should they even rely on him at all at this point? Because I think what we, to summarize last week, it was, yes, this is problematic. And yes, there always seems to be this qualifier about why he's behind schedule. And it's kind of annoying. And certainly he's a good guy and a good teammate, and all of those things that people are starting to pile on him for probably aren't really true. But at the end of the day, like, he's been okay. I guess he was okay last year, but he comes into this spring training and he's not ready, and he's not going to be ready. So now if you're the Phillies, everyone's talking about Jordan Montgomery, and oh, well, here you go. Stars are aligning. He's still on the market. Do you believe the recent reports that Jordan Montgomery has like multiple deals on the table for long-term decent money? Because I feel like that's the agent saying, get the word out to the guys like Jim Bowden out there. Like, I think that you probably could do a deal similar to what we saw with Blake Snell. We know about the payroll limitations. Maybe limitations isn't the right word, but they're really up against it now. You're talking about going in an entirely different stratosphere very early on in the season, when you might want to address issues further down the line.
Correct.
Like, where do you lie on this thing? Like, do you panic now and do it?
No, I don't at all. It's, in fact, and I don't want to lean too far into what we got coming up on the show, because I do have a prediction that is going to kind of relate to this a little bit. But I do not think that they go get a Jordan Montgomery right now, because it doesn't make sense to do it right now. You let the season play out. See what, you feel like you have people that can get you through. Spencer Turnbull, yeah, he was terrible last year, but he's had some success in the past as a starter for the Detroit Tigers. Like, you can go with him for 10 starts and see what you got. And maybe he's acceptable. Maybe he's passable for 10 starts and gets you closer to the deadline, right? And you see what else kind of takes shape over the course of time. Maybe Nick Abel blows people away in Lehigh Valley, and then he's ready to come up and pitch at the major league level. You don't know. So I think it's worth sticking with what you got right now and not overreacting and trying to sign a guy to a contract that you don't want to exceed that tax, that next tax tier. So I'm fine with the Phillies not chasing Jordan Montgomery right now. Let him go somewhere else. If somebody wants to give him a long-term deal, more power to them, right? Maybe the Yankees do, because they're worried about Garrett Cole's elbow. Who knows?
Right.
But the Phillies don't need to be involved in that. I don't think so. Not right now, anyway.
Are you of the mind that the production that you're going to get from Spencer Turnbull the first month of the season is what you would have gotten from Taijuan Walker anyway? Like, do you think that this injury changes the Phillies' outlook over the first 30 games of the season?
Not really. No, because Walker was behind to begin with. So let's imagine that he doesn't
By the way, if you get Jordan Montgomery, he's probably not going to be ready until the third week of April at this point anyway.
At least.
Unless he's really lathered up right now, which I just don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, no, the only guy that's really lathered up right now that no one's signing is Trevor Bauer.
Yeah. I'm gonna stay away from that one. I'm good on that.
Yeah, he looked good against the Yankees for what it's worth, but nobody's going to sign him. No, but the point is that you're right. I think that Spencer Turnbull has just as good a possibility of giving you the same output that a behind schedule Taijuan Walker would have given you for the first month of the season. Right. So what's the big deal? Like to me, it is what it is, and it's fine. Look, if your number 5 starter can give you 5 innings and keep you, 4.5 ERA, you're happy. You're taking that.
I think that's where my assessment comes down. You listen to Dave Dombrowski talk at the beginning of last week, and he just said, we're very comfortable with where we're at right now with our rotation. And he said that before the Taijuan Walker injury news. Fine. And he said that before Taijuan Walker was very concerning in his latest outing, injury aside. Okay. Yeah. But if that is your organizational assessment of where you're at, I don't think that this injury setback should fundamentally change where your stance is on this thing. Like, I don't think you say, oh man, we might be without Taijuan Walker for 5 weeks. We've got to go out here now and, pull the trigger on $30 million a year for another starter. Now, do I think he makes the Phillies better? Yes. If they did it, I'd certainly tell you that I feel much better about the Phillies starting rotation. It would be an upgrade. It would probably start to make you feel a little bit like, wow, okay, now you're in a playoff series and you can go Montgomery, a guy who was a big game pitcher last year. You can go Nola, Wheeler, and then what Suarez brings to the table. Like, oh my God, like the city would be pumped up, and it would be, in theory, a nice move, but I just wonder about the financial implications and kind of hamstringing yourself as the season progresses. Now, here's the thing, though. You talk about going to win the division. We're going to get into this in a little bit, but we can sit here and say it's time for the Phillies to compete for a division. It's time for the Phillies to win a division. Odds makers have the Braves sitting at 101.5 right now in terms of wins this season. And maybe that's inflated. Maybe that's a crazy number. But they also have the Phillies sitting at 89.5 right now. There's a 12-game gap between these two teams coming in, which you can sit there and say that's absurd, but when you go back and look at the results each of the last 2 years, it's really not that absurd. It's not. It's a fair line. It's fair odds. So, like, the Phillies could theoretically be in a situation where you need to do another significant move to kind of bridge this gap and make it a little bit more honest. I get why people want to do it. If money was not an issue, if tying yourself down 4 months from now was not an issue, I would say, yeah, hell yeah, go do it. But as it stands now and having to kind of understand that there could be some changes that you need to make once you get into this thing, I think it's really tough to do that at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I look at those odds, and I know why they're set that way. You know why they're set that way, because they want to set action for people to bet above and below that. And so when you see 101.5 for the Braves, they want money on both sides of that. And so like that's the middle ground. Like they think the Braves could really be a lot even better than 101. Same thing with the Phillies. They look at 89.5 and say that's kind of like, we think people could go on both sides of that number, and the Phillies could be on either side, but part of that could be, if you take an optimistic view, they could be a lot better than that. I think that they're okay going into the season with what they have. If you sign a Jordan Montgomery right now, and everybody would get excited, and the city would be like, they're the Phillies, they're all in, whatever, that's great. Then what do you do at the deadline if you need something? Like you hamstring yourself. Determine what your needs are, and then that last little bit of money that there's room left that they're willing to spend or get whatever, you decide at that point what it is that you're going to go get. Right? Don't feel
the counter is that to that though is that you are leaving a little bit up to fate. Like you're leaving things up to uncontrollables. Like you don't know how the market's going to shape up. You don't know how many teams are going to consider themselves buyers or how many teams are not going to be willing to part with difference makers. Like you don't know where the standings are going to be come the end of July. You also only have to deal with money in this situation. Like this isn't about trading assets. It's not about trading prospects. This is just dollars. You don't have the picks attached to them on the free agent signing side of things. There is an argument to say, like, why not just get out ahead of it? I side with you, but I do think it's important to at least highlight that there are some reasons that you could say, like, let's just get into it now. We were probably going to, I think it was save the powder is something that was said. I mean, yeah, okay, like that's great, but you were probably going to use that powder at some point. So be a little bit more proactive. And obviously injuries can certainly change the calculus of this entire thing, but What are they going to add? What is the thing right now? Like, let me ask you this. What are the Phillies likely going to have to add at the deadline? Is it going to be another starting pitcher? Is it going to be a bullpen piece? Is it going to be somebody that can go play center field every day? That's, maybe the whole idea that you can have a 170 hitter out there because this offense is going to be so great, it'll be fine. Maybe that doesn't play out that way. Maybe a couple guys in their early 30s start to look like they're in their early 30s. Maybe a couple of these guys take a step back. Maybe Nick Castellanos goes through 3 months where he's hitting 180 and you're like, oh, here we go again with this. Like, there are a lot of different things that can happen here.
And see, and that's why, and I think that I'm glad you're bringing all this stuff up, Bob, because I think that that's the important part that people don't always, we are the here and now society, right?
Everyone just assumes that the Phillies are what they were last year and that all the parts are going to replicate. Oh, well, we know what Alec Boehm is now. We know that Bryson Stott's ascending.
Yeah.
We know that Nick Castellanos is going to hit 70 extra base hits this year. Like, we don't know any of that.
Right. That's my point. And so I think that the more prudent approach is let's see where we are going and what we're doing and who's doing what over the course of the first couple months of the season. And if that's all happening, great. That's great. If that's all happening, that's cherry on top of the sundae, man. That's perfect. Then we go just get the one thing that we need at the deadline, and then bang, we make that push again in September and October. But if not, if something goes wrong, if somebody tails off, or if we have a major injury and we need to replace one of our everyday players, well, guess what? Now we have saved the money that we were going to spend on Jordan Montgomery in March for something else that is more important, more pressing at the moment. I think it's a prudent way to approach it from a business perspective.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. All right, well, so why don't we look ahead here, and we'll just do 3 Phillies-related predictions for this season. And this isn't, I think the Phillies will win X amount of games, but these are kind of like, some fun things, whether it be the team does this or this is going to happen or this player will do this. So we'll just kind of go back and forth here, and I'll let you kind of kick it off.
Well, I'll go first since this will be a nice transition from what we were just discussing. And it's one I hinted already. One of my predictions for this year is the Phillies will add an impact starting pitcher at the trade deadline.
So we just said all of this. If you could just do it now again, like you could just do this now.
Well, that's what here's what I think is going to happen is I think that they're going to look at this and say they're going to be competitive. They're going to be really good. Their pitchers are going to be fine. Whether it's Walker or coming back and pitching okay, or Turnbull's pitching okay, or Sanchez is pitching okay. But I think that the Phillies might find themselves in a position this year, Bob, at the deadline. Like last year at the deadline, they weren't catching the Braves. They kind of knew that they were going to be a team that was probably going to be in the playoffs, right? You looked around the league and said, yeah, the Phillies are a better team than some of these other wild card teams. They didn't really feel like they needed to do as much. I think that this year they're going to be in a position where it's like, we have a shot at winning this division. We have a shot at getting home field throughout the playoffs or something along those lines, right? And then you sit there and go, this could be the year, go get that player. And I think that that's why, not because I feel like they need it right this minute, but I think that they'll look at it and say, we're close enough on July 31st. We get that impact starting pitcher. We'll make that push to win this division and hope that carries us through to the World Series.
I like that, and I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility. I have one for you that's not super optimistic, or maybe it is. I don't know, but I think that Whit Merrifield's going to play more games for the Phillies this year than Johan Rojas does. I don't think this is going to work out. I really just don't. I think he'll catch the ball. I think that he provides value. I'm not saying it's going to be a disaster or anything like that, but I think they're going to reach a point where it becomes obvious that, similar to what we saw last postseason, where you're like, at some point, despite the defense, it becomes a diminishing return. And I think they're going to have to do something here. And I could see a scenario where Brandon Marsh goes out and ends up playing much more center field than the Phillies want him to. And Whit Merrifield's playing a lot of left field. Yeah,
I don't think you're too far off on that either, Bob, because, well, let's look at it this way.
And I'll even amend that so far as to say, like, I think Whit Merrifield plays more games in the outfield this season than Johan Rojas.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's fair. And so the thing of it is that I think that ultimately, when you say the diminishing return, ultimately, if this team had a true on base machine type of hitter, guy that just gets on base a lot, that you could put at the top of the order, then it wouldn't matter that Johan Rojas is batting ninth and struggling. It really wouldn't. But they don't have that, and it impacts. They don't have a true leadoff hitter, so Schwarber is their best option for now. And because of that, you are negatively impacting Kyle Schwarber by having Johan Rojas bat behind him. I mean, we talked about it at the beginning, and I think that you can't let that go on and on and on throughout the entire season. So I don't think your prediction there is too far off.
I think that part of the prediction lies in the fact that I'm not entirely certain that this lineup is, and I know people are listening to this and they're pumped up and everyone's excited, and I am too, and I'm bullish on this team overall. So I don't want what I'm about to say to become the, like the lead here, but I'm not as convinced as everybody else is that this offense is just going to be murderer's row. Like I don't know that they're a top 5 offense. Like we went down this road last year. I feel like we've gone down this road a lot with the Phillies in recent years where it's like, oh man, this lineup at Citizens Bank Park and watch out. Like they finished 8th in runs per game last year. That feels right around where I think they're going to be, top 10, maybe top 12 in runs per game. But you're talking about a lot of players in this lineup that are wildly inconsistent. And I just think that when you look at the inconsistencies, you ride the good and you kind of just have to weather the storm when it's not going well. Like, I don't think there's enough consistency in the way that the Phillies profile up and down this lineup to say that, yeah, this is a top 5 offense. I just don't see it. And so I just don't think that this idea that, and I'll just tie it all up here, I don't think that Johan Rojas can go out there and hit 150 and it be something the Phillies are going to have a stomach for 4 months. Like, I just don't think that's how this is going to work out.
I agree with you. Okay, on to my second prediction. Ranger Suarez throws 180 innings this year and leads the team in victories. Not that that's a big deal, but I think that that's a thing. I think he's their team leader in wins. Because I think that look, and the rotation always gets juggled around for whatever reason, days off and rainouts and things along those lines. So it's never just, the best pitchers are always pitching against the best pitchers. But more often than not, you try to have your best pitchers lined up to pitch against the other team's best pitchers. And I think Ranger Suarez is one of the better number 3s in baseball. And going up against the competition, I'd like him to get more wins because I think the Phillies offense will hit those pitchers that he's going up against more than they will, your Striders of the world, right? So I just think that Ranger Suarez has a really complete season for the first time, throws a lot of innings, and leads the team in wins at the end of the year.
And I like that. That's bold. His career high in wins is 10, and he's coming off a season which he threw 125 innings. His career high is 155. So, you might be listening to this going, all right, sounds good. But I mean, that's going to take a jump. Like, that's going to require a jump from him in his game. So we'll see if he gets to it. Okay. I like that. Let me see if I can hit you with something a little bit more positive here. I think Trey Turner is going to be an all-star this year, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. So last year, we all know the deal. Horrible start, gets hot at the end, finishes with 26 home runs, 170 hits, 30 steals. I think that this year, you're looking at a guy that hits north of 280. I think he finishes with 30-plus homers. I think he's like a 75 extra base hit guy. I think he finishes with 40 steals. I think he really has the year that you're expecting him to. I don't know what he does defensively. I hope there's a little bit more in his game defensively, a little bit more consistency, just making routine plays. But I do think from an offensive standpoint that he's going to have the year that people are looking at him to have.
And I think that you're spot on with that, Bob. And if we're wrong about this one, then I start to question this signing, to be honest with you. Yeah. Because I think that Turner in year 2 is going to be the Trey Turner we all thought was going to be here from the beginning last season, right? And I think that there's not only is he an all-star caliber player, but he could be elite in the National League this year.
It was a year ago that we were doing these shows and saying he's probably a top 3 MVP candidate coming into this season, and then that certainly never materialized. but I think that people all of a sudden have. I think they've kind of gone like the other way to an extreme here, where it's like, yeah, like we'll see, he's all right. I'm like, guy's damn good player. He's a top 20 player in baseball for a 5-year run. I think it's much more likely that he gets back to being something like that, as opposed to the player that we saw really struggle to find himself for 4+ months last year.
Yeah, I think that's a good prediction by you. All right, my final prediction for the season. For 1 year, this season, 2024, JT Realmuto is going to take back the title of best catcher in baseball.
And this is attributed to his mechanical adjustments and kind of ability to get to the inside pitch. And
look, I was just watching it, man. Like just being down there and just like looking at him and watching his at bats. You could see, like you could just see it. And I don't know how many people, any of our listeners have actually watched for it or looked for it. Maybe they will now. Maybe that the games are going to matter starting the end of this week. People will start to look for this, and you could just see how it works for him now. And I just think that he's going to have a season like he had in 22, where he was probably the Phillies' most valuable player, at least the second half of the season that year, for sure. And I think over the course of the full year, you're going to see that kind of offense out of JT. He's probably your cleanup hitter for much of the year, right? I mean, that's where they're going to slot him in. And I think that the reason that they're doing that is because they're seeing that change as well. As opposed to
maybe a home run today in the spring training finale here against the Rays. So
yeah, I think that it's legit. I think JT has a Realmuto type year, circa 18 to 22, as opposed to what we saw out of him last year, where he was a little bit more sporadic.
I think I know the answer to this. I want to just digress for 1 second, because God forbid we just stay totally on track here. Kyle Schwarber, 132. Bryce Harper, 179. Outbound, 268. Stott, 200.
Castellanos is low, too.
Castellanos, 119, 0 for 2 today.
Yeah.
Any concern about any of this?
I mean, it's spring training, so I don't really have concern, especially with veteran players. I mean, young players, I do, because they're trying to make an impression and they're trying to make sure that they secure jobs. But these guys all know what they got to do to get themselves ready. And so, like, no, I don't put stock in spring training numbers. But I mean, if you come to me, 3 weeks from now and those numbers are pretty similar, then we can have a whole different conversation.
Okay.
But for spring training, no, I don't put a lot of concern into it.
Well, though I did just call the Phillies offense wildly inconsistent, and I'm not quite sure that they're a top 5 offense. I do think that they're going to finish in the top 5 in home runs per game this year. This was one that was really, really strange to watch unfold a season ago. I think that this is a prediction I may have had last year around this time. And you go to June 1st of last season, and the Phillies were 21st in all of baseball in home runs per game as a team. And I forget the exact stat. I recall at one point saying, oh my God, they have one player on pace for 20 home runs or more this season. And it was fairly well into the season. I think it was right around Memorial Day.
It was later. We were into June.
It was crazy. I mean, It was crazy to watch it unfold. And where they ended up with was they finished 8th. So I think that you see that they're much more that team. I think that they are going to once again be super reliant on the home run, as are many teams in the sport in 2024. But I do think that this is going to be a top 5 team in home runs per game. I think you're going to get a ton out of Turner, a ton out of Schwarber, a ton out of Harper. And then I think there's several guys in this lineup that could get to or eclipse 20.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a pretty good call by you. I think, when you think about it, I mean, Harper didn't really start hitting home runs until August last year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. I mean, so get a full season out of him. I think that automatically just elevates you.
Let me hit you with this one. Of the Phillies regulars, how many get to 20 home runs?
Well, all right, let's look around it. I say Schwarber, Castellanos, Harper, Turner, Realmuto,
Boom. Okay, so we like Bohm for 20. So if that happens, you have a pretty good offense here. I mean, not that the home run is everything, but
Bohm's the one I'm closest on. He might be then that 18, like 17, 18 range. Same with Real Muto might be in that same kind of, but still, even if they're just off by a couple, you're still talking a ton of home runs, right? So it's good.
All right, I asked you before we got together here to give me a surprise, you could take this any number of ways.
I'm going to save my surprise for the end.
Okay.
You could give your surprise now, but there's a reason I'm saving my surprise for the end.
I read the other day that the Phillies have the best bullpen in baseball. And I have an unfortunate surprise here. I think that the Phillies bullpen is going to have a hell of a first month. And for a couple of reasons. And long term, top 5 bullpen, sure, I could see that. I think that the Kerkering injury is a little bit concerning in that just from a depth standpoint, look at all these arms and how many different ways they can hit you. And I want you to bat me down here. I want you to tell me dude, you're overthinking this. But so now you have Turnbull pulled up into the rotation. So now I got Christopher Sanchez, who's probably only going to give me 5 innings most of the time here, especially early on. I think 5 you would take. Turnbull's not going to give you any length. Yeah, I know that Nola and Wheeler are going to give you a lot of innings up front. You obviously seem to think that Ranger Suarez will as well. I'm a little less bullish on that in the short term. I wonder if there's a little bit of a ramp-up period for him. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking at a bullpen that now consists of the back end of it, Connor Brogdon, who I'm credit to him for being back, but man, there was a time last year where I thought we'd never see him again.
Oh, and I think he's a short-term thing. It could be just a short-term thing with him.
You would think Kerkering might become him.
Yes.
But then you've got Marte, you've got Ortiz. Those are 3 names that man, that's almost 3/8 of your bullpen. And that's the best bullpen in baseball. I just think it's going to take them a little bit of time. Gregory Soto is a guy that I think about 6-7 weeks ago, I thought was poised for this huge year. I went into all these secondary numbers about how he was actually much better a year ago than his numbers suggested, or his base numbers suggested. And that is true. And I can make that argument again. Hasn't been awesome this spring. Had a blow-up 9th inning the other day. A couple walks in today's appearance. He has not been particularly sharp. Again, I know, veteran guy. How much do you really tie to results and performance in spring training, especially as you get to the end of it? I get that. But there's just some things here that I'm I don't know. So when I say they're going to struggle, I don't necessarily mean that's going to be a disaster and they're going to be blowing games left and right. I think when you get the Phillies' best relievers into a game in the 7th or later, they should be fine. But I do worry a little bit about not necessarily getting the innings from the starting rotation 1 through 5 in the early going. And then you look at some of the depth issues that they have. I just wonder if you start to work that bullpen a decent amount these first 5-6 weeks or so, if you could really start to have some problems here.
Well, it's always an issue, right? You never want to work your bullpen too much. If you remember beginning of last year, right? Andrew Bellotti was really good for them in the first few weeks of the season.
Yes.
But they overused him because they were having bullpen issues, and then he had nothing left after that. So you got to be really judicious about how you use your bullpen. And I agree.
This is the thing. You're talking about a team too that wants to play into deep October. They're not. I would be very surprised in the early going if you're going to get the Dominguez, Alvarado, Hoffman combo every time they have a lead in the 7th inning. I just don't. I feel that they are going to be very cautious, and I feel that there's going to be some exposure to some of these guys that you wouldn't necessarily want pitching with a lead or a short lead.
One order of business we did not discuss that came about yesterday. They signed Matt Strahm to an extension. It goes through next season now, and then there's even a club option for 26. So he could be here for 3 more seasons now, this year plus 2 more. They obviously think that there's something there for the back end of that bullpen. And I think it's going to be a lot like the Red Sox used to use. What was that lefty's name? Multiple inning, Andrew Miller, right? I really think that you look at a guy like him and say he's going to be leaned on because he threw so many innings last year, mostly as a starter. So a lot of them as a starter, but that they realize that they can get, 88, 90 innings out of Matt Strahm. You might see him be leaned on a little bit more earlier in the season for multiple inning type stuff just to get them through to Kerkering getting back. And so that could be part of the plan to, or even fill the void of that 7th, 8th, 9th, Dominguez, Alvarado, Hoffman, whatever order that's going to be. Maybe he fills that, right? And does a little bit more, he's a catch-all. He can do whatever for you. And I think that he becomes a really important piece in that bullpen, especially early in the season.
I'm actually stunned at how well he responded late in the year, because you remember, like, they got another guy that they just rode. I mean, like, he was making starts for them, obviously. Remember, we had the conversation, and it feels like forever ago, should Matt Strahm be in this rotation? And obviously he shouldn't have been. We know that. But he really went through a mid-season lull late in the summer. We were like, oh, man, they crushed this guy. Like, they burned him out. You credit him for the way that he finished, and he did nail down some really key outs. I believe he finished the Braves series, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. He did.
And, again, I think that you're right in that he is going to play a big role. And I think the Phillies do see something in him. And I think that the Phillies probably feel that we haven't seen the best of him yet. So that'll definitely be something, I think, in the early going that will help them as well. And we talk about multiple innings, perhaps. Okay. What else do I have here? Because now you got me thrown off because you're not doing the surprise.
Well, I'm going to save the surprise. I'm going to give it to you, but I'm just going to save it for a minute.
Okay. All right. Team MVP. This is probably just you predicting what Bryce Harper finishes with, right?
I mean, how do you go against Harper as the team MVP? I mean, you got to assume he's the team MVP. But I figured you were going to go with Bryce Harper, so I came up with another one.
Okay. All right. Well, I am going to go with Bryce Harper. I'm going to be a square here. I'm going to go with the public. I think that I guess I expect to see the best of Bryce Harper this season. I think it's one of the reasons when I look at this Phillies team, I actually do have some questions about it, and I have some concerns with this team. Bryce Harper, though, I think is going to be so good that it might just offset some of that. When I just look at the way that I think that this is going to go. So I think you're going to get 35 plus home runs out of him this year. I think he's going to play a well above average first base. And I just think that maybe when you look back at Bryce Harper's career in this city, certainly there's been a lot of achievements already. He's already won MVPs, had big playoff moments. I just think that this might be the season that you highlight and say, like, damn, his 24 was insane. I really feel that way.
Yeah.
So that'll be my guy.
It could well be. And look, it's hard to go against that, right? I mean, it really is. I mean, how can you say anybody other than Harper?
And if you need me to just take that a step further, because like it's such a square prediction. Just he's back on the field. He's healthy. He comes in healthy. I just think you're going to get a more engaged player, kind of hits the ground running. I don't think that you're going to see his power evaporate for 2 months. Like, I just think that you're going to get the best of him and a consistent version of him all year.
Yeah. And you're probably right. And that's why it's funny to come up with something else. But I will say this, the whole thing about Zach Wheeler adding a split finger fastball to his repertoire to try and get out lefties. Like, that is something to me that if in fact it does play and plays well, and now all of a sudden you're looking at having a guy at the top of your rotation who is a Cy Young candidate, part of that could be a difference maker. Wheeler's always the ace. We got that. We know that. But if you're now going to go to a new territory where not only are you the best pitcher on the team, but you're the best pitcher in the league, I could look at that as being an MVP, team MVP worthy kind of season. I mean, we know what the lineup does, but
you look at the odds right now, and it's Spencer Strider to win the NL Cy Young is plus 450, and Zach Wheeler plus 800. He has the second best odds of any NL pitcher to win it. And I know we talked about it. You're getting a heck of a matchup on opening day, whenever opening day happens, whether it be Thursday or Friday. Here it is, guys. Like, a hell of a test right off the bat. So you're picking a guy that is probably poised for it, and odds makers would support that. Just in terms of NL MVP, Bryce Harper is tied, I believe, with Fernando Tatis Jr. for the fourth best odds to win NL MVP. I believe, I don't have it in front of me, Freeman, Betts. Who's Ohtani? The other obvious one? Yes. No, it's Acuna. And then Ohtani. I could just bring it up. What the hell? We got time, right? Yeah, let's pull this up.
I'm surprised if Ohtani's not up there with those guys.
Actually, yeah. All right, my bad. So we have Acuna plus 500, Betts plus 650, Ohtani plus 750, Tatis Jr. 1,000, Harper 1,000, Freeman's right behind him at plus 1,200.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Yeah,
there
yeah.
You go. Three Dodgers in the top 6.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Unbelievable.
It's absolutely ridiculous. All right, so what do you want to go to next? Do you want to go to the Phillies' final record, or do you want to do the playoff predictions? I got to say,
I guess it doesn't really matter. We'll do the record. I'll go first on this one. I got them winning 93 games.
Okay, I got them at 94 and 68.
Okay,
so we're pretty much 90, in the same.
93 and 69. Okay, I figured we would. Figured we were going to land somewhere in the same area there. All right, so then let's get to it. We'll do the NL East first. I have the Atlanta Braves winning this division again. I have the Braves winning 96 games and beating the Phillies by 3. I do think that you get into September and you're looking at the standings and they'll have a shot. But I do not think that the Phillies are really in control of this division at any point. And I still think that they're chasing from behind.
Okay. And then what do you have? So you have the Phillies second, and then how do you have the rest of the division?
I do. I have the Marlins third. I think the Mets are going to need a year. And I think the Nationals are interesting, but not quite there yet. Go ahead.
Okay. I actually think that the Mets are a little bit better. I know, and I'm a guy who makes fun of the Mets all the time, right? And I called the Mets being a disaster last year before the season happened. I think they're actually going to be a little bit better. And in that regard, I think that the National League East is going to be a little bit better at the bottom end of it than I think that than maybe it was a season ago. So I think the Mets are going to be a little bit better, and the Marlins are about right where they're at. I think the Nationals, like you said, they're interesting, and I think that they're interesting enough to not be a dreadful team, but they could be a last place team that wins 70 games, right?
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, the NL East odds right now, the Mets have better odds to win the division than the Marlins do. Like the Marlins probably are taking a step back here. It's more of a bet against the Mets than it is really a sort of confidence for the Marlins.
No, but I mean, but what I mean by this is I think that there's some mediocrity at the bottom of the division, whereas in other divisions, the bottom of the divisions are bad, right? I mean, let's just be honest. So with that, I'm not certain that the Braves are going to get that high win total, that super high win total. As a result, I have your Philadelphia Phillies pulling out the division by a game over the Atlanta Braves.
Wow. Okay. I was not expecting that. I thought you were going to continue your Braves thing here.
Yeah.
The Phillies win the division by a game.
By a game over the Braves. I have the Braves.
I'm very
at
curious to see if you think that momentum will carry over into the postseason.
Yeah, the Phillies at 94, the Braves at 93.
How about that? Okay. Yeah. I just look at that 12-game gap, and I think that that's ridiculous. The way that, I get it. I said it earlier. It makes perfect sense, but I think that when you get into the season, a few things. One, yes, I agree. The division is a little bit better, especially towards the bottom part of it. I also think it's something you said, and I'm surprised you didn't bring this up again, but you said it about a month or two ago. The Braves last year sort of did it. They had all these all-stars up and down the lineup, set all these offensive records. This is the greatest offense of all time. They win over 100 games again. Okay, great. And for what? And I do wonder if there's a little bit of a foot off the gas.
Yes.
Let's sort of not be so all in this time around. And I do think that it's important to the Phillies, and I think you'll get a better version of the Phillies through 55, 60 games, whatever it is. And it's not them playing at 100-win pace, just trying to get out of the hole that they dug themselves. So I think that the gap shrinks. I just don't have them passing the Braves.
Yeah. And I think that, and that's the thing of it is, and I think that, I did say that a couple weeks ago, and I think that it's good that you bring it back up, but I also don't think that the Braves can replicate that offensive season that they had last year. I just don't see it. I don't see the replication of it. I mean, yes, they're all great players, and I'm not trying to say that they had career years, but for everybody to play at that level at the same time is a very, very rare thing in sports in general, for everybody on one team to be playing at such a high level. So there's going to have to be a step back somewhere, a little bit of a regression. And so that I think it's enough of a regression, and I'm still not in love with their bullpen. Their rotation is, I think, a little bit better, but even then you're relying on older pitchers. Sales had a bunch of injuries. Charlie Morton's 40 years old. you're relying on some of that, and I think that that catches up to you a little bit sometimes. And so, like, I think that there can be enough of a regression for the Phillies to just squeak past, and that's why I have the Phillies winning the division.
Okay, I like that. That's fun. I don't want to do the team by team standings in the rest of the division, but I will give you my Central and my West will stay here in the NL. I'm going Cubs in the Central. I believe they are the favorite right now, and shocker here, I'm going to take the Dodgers. Even if something with this gambling investigation goes totally sideways, I'll still take the Dodgers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to ride the Dodgers just on the sheer power of their star power. Even like you said, even if that does go south, you could take Ohtani out of that lineup, and they're still the favorite, I think, to win the division. The Central is a mess. It really is. I know the Cubs are the favorite, but I could conceivably see any of those 5 teams finishing on top, because I could see them having each of those teams having reasons they can have a good season and reasons that they can have a terrible season.
I just think ultimately I trust the Cubs rotation a little bit more. Not that it's fantastic, but I just think there's enough like depth in it, enough consistency in it that I'll just give them the nod, but I don't feel great about it. In fact, if you're a bettor, you probably want to take one of the other teams and try to get some value out of that.
You know why I think the Cubs are the favorite, though? The manager.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's why they're the favorite. They're the same team as last year.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's basically the same team, and they were interesting. They were in it for a while and then faded down the stretch. And I think that the whole Craig Counsell hire is probably their biggest offseason move and probably why they're the favorite. I'm going to ride the Reds. I think that they have the young talent. I think that the offense is really, really good. I like a lot of those young players that they have. Yeah, I know that the starting pitching is real hit or miss right now. But if one or two of those guys has a full season and lives up to potential, they're a dangerous team. And so I'm going to go with the Reds to win that division. Although I could seriously, it was the toughest call of all the divisions. It was the toughest.
I guess I tried to redeem myself a little bit here with the rest of these predictions because I took the division winner, like the odds-on favorite in each of the 3 divisions. I'll give you my wild card teams. I have the Phillies. Obviously, they're my top wild card. I have the San Diego Padres as the second wild card. I think we get a little bit of a Padres revival after all the hype last year. It was a disastrous season. They were just straight up losers the entire way. I think that there's enough there. I just think like offensively, there's enough there. I think there's some bounce backs. I'm taking a little bit of a shot with that. I know you can make the argument that San Francisco's better than them. I get it, especially at the top of the rotation now with the 1-2 punch that they have. But I'm going to just bet on a Padres bounce back. And then my third wild card team is the Cincinnati Reds. So you and I kind of see that similarly, though I'm not picking them to be at the top of it.
Yeah, well, my wild cards, obviously the Braves is my top wild card. I have the Giants as my second wild card. I wouldn't have until the end of the spring trade. And it wasn't just adding Snell, but it was they signed Chapman as well. Yeah. That was a nice signing for them as well. And I think that the signing of Jung-Hoo Lee is going to probably be a little bit under the radar as a nice offseason signing for them. I think that their lineup is better. I think that
this is really just about Gabe Kapler being out of there, right?
Their rotation really didn't even come into play. It really didn't. I would not have picked the Giants if we did this prediction thing 10 days ago. I wouldn't have put the Giants in this spot.
I totally get it. I hear you.
And I have Arizona. I think that they made some upgrades as well. Even though that
everyone's sleeping on the Diamondbacks, they are. I mean, they are. And I'm like doing this exercise, and I'm like, they won the National League last year, and they might be better this season, and I don't have them in the playoffs. I'm going with the shitty Padres team that were a bunch of dogs last year.
Yeah.
I guess I had to get cute somewhere. So
that's all right. That's all right. No, so I have Arizona as the last wild card team again, getting in. So yeah, if I have Phillies, Reds, Dodgers, Braves, Giants, Diamondbacks is my 6 teams.
Right, well, we'll go over to the AL before we get to the who wins the National League, I guess.
Yep.
Look, I don't get it. Garrett Cole, that is a huge deal.
Yep.
I love the Orioles. I love what they did last year. I thought that they were a year before their time. Fast forward a year, Corbin Burns. I know there's a lot of stuff about Holiday not being up and like, what the hell are these guys doing? Like, same old stuff. But you got the ownership change there. That transfer, I think, is about to be complete. I think this is a team that would add at the trade deadline a year after standing pat at the trade deadline. It kind of feels like, to me anyway, and I know Bautista, you don't have him the back of the bullpen this year, and he was unbelievable, and you're going to rely on Craig Kimbrell to pitch late, and God knows I'd be the first to tell you good luck with that, especially after how many innings he threw for the Phillies last year. All that said, I still think that the Orioles are the best team in the AL East, and I kind of just expect them to play like that.
Yeah, I have the Orioles winning that division as well, and I just think that they're going to be a team that we're talking about in a lot of the ways that we've talked about Houston for the last 7 years, 8 years. I think the Orioles are going to be that for the American League going forward. There's just so much young talent there. This is going to be a renaissance era for Baltimore baseball after it's been so down for so long. I do think that the Orioles are the best team in the American League East, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I wonder if there's a little New York or Yankees bias juiced up in that line, because they have them as co-favorites right now, and I really don't think it's close, honestly. Okay, I'll take the Astros in the West, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll take the Twins in the Central, I guess. I actually think the Twins are markedly better than any other team in the Central.
Yeah, I have both the same. I have Houston only because of their pitching. I have them ahead of Texas. Now, Texas, if guys come back this season, your DeGrom gets back this season, and Scherzer gets back going, and they're DeGrom and Scherzer, well, then all of a sudden it's a whole different conversation. But as of right now, I think Houston is in a better position all the way around to actually win the division. So I'll take the Astros. And I have the Twins winning the Central, but I don't think it's as big of a gap maybe as you do. Okay. I don't have anybody else making the playoffs out of that division, but I think the Detroit Tigers and Kansas City Royals are going to be in that race a little bit this year. I think that they're going to hang around. I think Detroit might be better than a lot of people thought, and I know Kansas City's probably a year away from being really competitive, but I think that they made some nice moves this offseason, so I think they'll hang around for a little while. There'll be a cute story before falling out, but I think it's going to be Twins winning that division as well, yes.
All right, for my wild cards, I'm going to go with the Mariners. I'm a believer there. I'm going to go with the Rangers. Going to take a defending World Series champ to at least reach the playoffs the next season. I'm going back to the well again, taking a little bit of a shot here. I'm taking my World Series winner from a year ago who didn't make the playoffs and had a horrible season, the Toronto Blue Jays.
Well, they made the playoffs.
I'm sorry, they
were out quick.
It's a blink of an eye. Just really struggled all year offensively. Like, you looked at that lineup going in, and you're like, this might be one of the best lineups I've ever seen. And they were just talk about the Phillies and some of the offensive struggles the Phillies had at times last year. The Blue Jays, it was like mystifying.
Yeah.
I think that they get in as well. I just don't know with the Yankees. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, it might be a glaring omission, and I just am not seeing this correctly. But I just don't. What if you're a Yankees guy right now? Like, what are you selling me on? What are you excited about for them?
Judge and Soto.
Yeah. Judge Soto. Stanton.
No, that's it. This is Judge and Soto.
Yeah,
it's really.
I know, like, Soto might hit 48 home runs, short perch, blah blah blah. Like, I get it, I do, but I don't know, man. I don't like the rest of their rotation. I really don't. I don't at all.
I have the Yankees finishing in 4th, as a matter of fact.
All right, so it's not like you're about to correct me and tell me why then.
No. So my 3 wild card teams are Texas first. Okay. Toronto second, Seattle third. So we have the same wild American League.
The whole same American League here.
Yeah, just different order on the wild card teams. But okay. Yeah, those are my 3 wild card teams. I think the Yankees finish 4th. I think Tampa finishes ahead of them.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and
I'm starting to wonder if we have the same World Series matchup here.
We'll see.
I'm going to start at the AL. I got the Orioles in the American League.
So do I.
Okay.
I have them beating the Astros in the ALCS.
And before we get to the drum roll, I just want to say 2 years ago, I picked either the Dodgers or the Braves to win the National League. Last year, I picked the Braves, and I picked them to win the World Series.
So I've picked them the last 2 years and been wrong. So
yeah, I picked the Braves to beat the Phillies in the playoffs 2 years ago. I actually don't even remember what I picked last year. All this is a very long way of saying that I pride myself on not being a homer. I think the Phillies are going to win the National League, and I think that they're going to beat the Orioles in the World Series this year.
So I have the same thing, Bob. I have the Phillies winning the World Series over the Baltimore Orioles. And that's why I was saving my surprise for the end, because I wanted to say my surprise for this year is that Sir Anthony Dominguez throws the final out of the World Series. I think that he reclaims his closer position at the back of the bullpen this year. And I think this is concerning to me now.
Now we better rethink this.
Both you and I picked the same World Series. Phillies over Orioles. Yes,
This is a show that, going back to 2018, was this the 7th season we've done this?
Yeah,
this is a show that prides itself on its negativity. And I think we've just hit the apex of, like, oh my God, without talking to one another, they have conspired to both pick the Phillies to win the World Series.
Yeah, and it's and I looked at it, and I think it's really that they're going to end up getting an easier path back to the NLCS.
Okay.
Because I have them winning the division.
Yeah.
So therefore I think that you're going to get, and I have them playing the Giants in the division series, which I like that matchup. And then the Braves and Dodgers are playing each other.
Yeah.
And then you get whoever comes out of there. I think it's Atlanta. And then your Phillies Braves one more time, NLCS though version this time, 7-game series.
The Braves have to just tear down the entire roster if the Phillies knock them out of the playoffs this year. They just have to say, listen, this has been a lot of fun, but we can't do this anymore.
Craziness, absolute craziness that we both went Phillies over Orioles.
Well, all right, you know what? Then I just have to, and we could just call it a day and that be it. But I just am not comfortable with that. Real quick, can you paint a scenario where this just doesn't work out for the Phillies? Can you where
Sure.
we 4 months in are oh my God, we just totally got swept up in the, they came so close, and veteran guys and trusting what they are. And to me, it's not the rotation, because I believe, I really do believe, it's Wheeler and Nola and Suarez, and that's going to be great. And I too do think that they probably will add at the trade deadline. I think the rotation is going to be really good. Yeah. I like the bullpen. I don't love the bullpen. I do have some questions there. The thing that I kind of keep coming back to is that these guys offensively, there are a couple guys that have some real boom or bust potential. And you get into your 30s, and none of them are really crazy old, but maybe Harper's back becomes an issue and doesn't have the season that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Maybe JT Realmuto doesn't have that rebound that you're talking about. Maybe Kyle Schwarber doesn't have that June, that kind of pulls him up and offset some of the inconsistencies that we see with him. Maybe Nick Castellanos is a disaster. Maybe center field's a mess. Maybe Bryson Stott doesn't take another step forward. Maybe Trey Turner has the year he had last year. If you want to go super negative, you can do that. I still think they're a pretty good team, even if a couple of those things happen. But is there a world where this offense just tanks and they're a middle of the road lineup and it's just not enough?
I'll be disappointed, Bob, if this team doesn't get off to a really good start. And what I mean by good start, I don't mean the first week of the season or 2 weeks of the season. I mean, we're in mid-May and having the same conversations we were having a year ago. Yeah. I will find that as a major disappointment.
Yeah.
And so, and maybe at that point we'll sit there and say, what were we thinking? By both picking the Phillies.
I'm just so uncomfortable.
But I just think there's something about running it back with a team that really, really believes in itself.
Yeah.
It's one thing to run it back with a team where you look at and go, why the hell are you running it back with that team? What were you thinking doing that? But the Phillies, they were in the World Series 2 games away from a title 2 years ago. They were 1 game away from getting back there a season ago. You have pretty much the same group again.
Yeah.
This is it. This is your run with this group. I think it's boom or bust this year with this team, and I'm going with the boom. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen here. And I think the city's going to finally have their big celebration and they're going to get their parade.
Get that 1983 revenge, huh? All right. Well, there you go. Phillies are going to win the World Series. Enjoy the season, everybody. No, thank you for tuning into. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
You have one last thing?
I had one quickie for you.
Okay, go ahead.
What the hell is going on with the Major League Baseball Players Association?
Go ahead.
Have you followed this?
No,
where they're trying to overthrow. There's like a coup attempt.
Oh, sorry.
And they're trying to overthrow the leadership, and they're all infighting, and it's like they're not happy with it. It's just a total disaster right now. That now they got to come out and speak about like the lawyers that they're hiring and like who's fighting over which lawyer should be working for the Players Association. And
Tony Clark in trouble, or are they trying to take down Tony?
Yeah, they're trying to take everybody down. They're trying to take down. They don't feel there's a faction of players who don't feel like that the leadership is representing them well. And that does not bode well for whenever the CBA comes up.
No,
it really does not. It's a bad situation. And to let it get out publicly, like you need to seem, when you're a union, you need to be unified or at least portray the fact that you are unified at all times.
Yeah, you see those fractures and the vulnerabilities and you attack those. And
yeah. So it's just look, just keep an eye on it. I think it could rear some more ugly heads, and it could be bad for the sport of baseball down the line in the next couple of years. I think everything's going to be fine going for this year, of course, but
that's why you guys win the World Series this year.
You got to win it now because there may not be a baseball season in a couple of years. It's just a mess, just an absolute mess. That's all. I just wanted to throw that out as a one last little thing. It just keep the eyeballs on what the heck's going on with the Players Association because it's not good.
All right. Well, for Anthony Sanfilippo and Bob Wankel, thanks for tuning in to Crossed Up. We will be back, I think, Friday morning if they play on Thursday, which, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
But we'll be back later this week. You can follow Anthony at AntSanPhilly on Twitter and X. You can follow me at Bob_Wankel. Check us out on Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you get your shows, and we'll talk to you soon.